Hi, today I'm going to be making tomato stew with chicken. There are many ways to make this tomato stew, but mostly in Ghana, when we're making tomato stew, we use a combination of fresh tomatoes and either tomato sauce or tomato paste or a combination of both in the stew. We do this to stretch the stew because fresh tomato, if it's not in season, it's expensive, and to get a lot to make a big pot of stew would be very expensive. So the other ingredients would be, I have 1.5 cups of onion. I cook with a lot of onion. And then you have 1 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, 1 teaspoon minced garlic, 1 teaspoon grated ginger, 1 teaspoon red chili pepper, 1 teaspoon of black pepper, and then I have some pieces of chicken. You can use less chicken, but we're a big family, so I use quite a bit of chicken, and we use both the bone-in and boneless. And then I have avocado oil, and I have some water, and I use a combination of salts. You do not have to use a combination of salts, so if you prefer any seasoning salt or plain salt, that should be good, but I like to use Himalayan pink salt these days. So I'm just showing you the type of salts that you can use in this meal, in this stew. You can use celery salt as well, garlic salt, and that should be fine. But for this stew, I'm going to be using the Himalayan pink salt. I do not have measurements for that. I would add the salt as needed. So first of all, you need to parboil your meat. So I'm going to be pouring this into a pot. Kind of looks small. And I'll turn on the heat. And into that, I'm going to be adding some water. I have 4 cups of water here. So it depends on how much water you need in your meat. So I'm going to be adding 2 cups of water to parboil the meat. Then into that, I'm going to be adding some salt. I'm going to be adding a teaspoon of the Himalayan salt. I might have to add half teaspoon, so I'm adding 1.5 teaspoons. It's a great idea to have a great broth in case you need to lighten up your stew. So I've added 1.5 teaspoons of this salt, but I will add some more as needed. In parboiling meats, I'll use parts of the seasoning. So I'm just going to take a pinch of this and put over. You can use all of that in the broth, but I like to use a little bit and the rest for the stew. So I'm going to cover this and let it boil for 10 minutes, and later I'll add the tomatoes. So I'll cover this and let it boil for 10 minutes. Okay, my 10 minutes is up here. So I'll stir the meat around, and into this I'm going to add the fresh tomatoes. You can use as many pieces of tomatoes as you want, but I'm using 5 pieces of Roman tomato. Any variety of fresh tomato should be fine. So I'm going to close this and let it boil an additional 5 minutes. Okay, after 5 minutes I would reduce the heat to the boiling meat here. And now the tomato is ready to be taken out. So I'll take out the tomato. You can blend your tomato fresh, cut them into pieces and blend. But this way you would help to hasten the cooking process, because when you blend out the tomato, some people like to blend with the skin on, which is perfectly fine. So if you want to leave your skin on, you can do that. So I'll leave the skin on just for demonstration, but mostly we take off the skin. And I'm going to cut it into, try to reduce the size to make it easier for the blender. Traditionally, we put the tomato in a potayoa here, like this, and then break it up and then grind it. Because growing up, blenders were not there at the time we were growing up, or even if you had a blender, electricity was an issue. So now I'm going, instead of doing it the African way, I'm going to use a blender. I was supposed to cut the tomato up, so hopefully I don't have a problem here. So I'll just chop it up in here. And I'll put in all the tomatoes. And then I wouldn't forget what I started with here just for demonstration. And I'm going to blend this till it's smooth. Okay, my tomato is all blended and smooth. I decided to blend it together with the skins on, but you can remove the skins and that should be fine. So right now, I reduce the heat of the chicken. So I'm going to be transferring the meat in here with the broth. And the broth is just perfect. The salt is just the right taste. So I ended up using 2 cups of water instead of the 4. But if you were making like a big pot of soup, you would have to add more water. So 2 cups is good. Then I'm going to add some oil into the pot here. So with the oil, I'm using avocado oil. I'm going to use half cup. Reduce the quantity of oil if you are making a smaller stew. I'm making quite a reasonable quantity of the stew here. So you can make it a 1/4 cup and that should be fine. And now I have to go ahead and increase up the heat. I had lowered it. Okay. So now you have the option to put all the onions in the heating up oil here. But I like to put about half of the onion here so that towards the end of the cooking, when the stew is all done, I like the taste and the smell of the fresh onion. So I'm going to be using about half of this onion. Hopefully that's a great quantity. I'll stir that for a minute. Then I'll go ahead and with the spices, it depends on your preference. If you prefer to add all at this stage, you go ahead and do that. But I will add it after I add in the tomatoes. But you can add it right now if you want. So after a minute, I'm going to add the tomato that I just blended. And remember, the broth can be of use. I like to cook and make use of everything in my containers. So there's quite a bit of tomato in the blender. So I just added a bit of the chicken broth and I pour it in here. So now that I've added my stuff, I'm going to add all the spices. You can, if you want to use cumin, you want to use curry powder, any seasonings you have of your choice, that should be perfectly fine. Then into that, I'm making quite a pot of stew here. I'm going to add the whole can of the tomato sauce here. And I'll equally fetch a bit of this broth to make sure I get out all the tomato sauce in the can. And that adds to the quantity of stew. It dilutes up the stew a little bit. Okay. Then into that, I'm going to add half can of the tomato paste here. If at this stage you do not feel like adding the tomato paste, you should be fine. But I want to add the tomato paste to give it some thickness as well. But I'll dilute it as needed. Oops, sorry. And be very careful. You just saw what happened here. My stew spilled a little bit. So I'm going to lower the heat to about medium. And then taste this. Okay, it tastes good already. And then cover it halfway and let it boil for 3 minutes. Then I'll show you the rest of the process. Okay, you have the option to put in your parboiled meat this way into the stew, or if you want, you can fry it lightly before putting it into the stew. For today, I'm going to be frying it lightly in some oil here. So I have an extra 2 cups of oil that I have here. This one is any cooking oil. So this is canola oil that I'm using in frying. So I'm going to put this in heated up oil here, and you just fry it lightly and put it in the stew. Sometimes I put it in just like this. So I will demonstrate frying a few of them, but I wouldn't be putting all of it into the stew. My kids just like it parboiled and fried as well. It looks like my pot for frying is kind of small, but I'm going to fry this till it's a little light golden brown. I'll take it out and put it in a plate, and when I feel my stew is okay, then I put it in the stew. But for demonstration, I'm going to this has been boiling for 3 minutes, so I'm going to stir this, and into that I'm going to be adding some of the pieces of meat with bone in here, just to show you that you can fry and put it in here, or you can just put in just the parboiled meat as well. So I'm going to be adding some of this fried meat in here just to show you how it's going to be. But we're going to be eating the parboiled meat just like the fried meat. So right now, after having added this, I'm going to stir it and taste to see if there's enough salt. We use habanero pepper in making the stew, but I decided just to use chili and black pepper. But we have habanero, ground habanero pepper in the fridge that we'll be using when we go to eat the stew. Okay, that tastes good, but I think it needs a little bit of salt. So I'll further lower the heat. Okay, and cover and let it cook an additional 3 minutes. So now the meat has been frying for a couple of minutes. It's light golden brown, which is excellent. So as you can see, you can fry your meat using this method and it will come out very well. But the secret behind great fried parboiled meat is to season it well. If you do not season it well, it doesn't taste really good. If you want it crunchier, I like my bones crunchier, I'll leave these in the bone in for a while, then I'll put the remaining meat into it, then fry till I get a light golden brown color. After 3 minutes of cooking, now I'm going to be adding the black pepper that I didn't add. But if after adding the chili pepper you realize that it's kind of spicy for you, that should be fine, but for us that's not enough. So instead of using the habanero pepper, I've used black chili pepper. So I'm going to be adding the remaining cut up red onion. Could you have added all this at the beginning? Yes, but this is a matter of preference. So now when you add, you stir it around and then taste to see the amount of salt that will be needed. I think I'll have to add about a quarter teaspoon of the Himalayan salt, and then into that I'm going to be adding some pieces of the fried meat. You do not have to do that. You could have just added the parboiled meat like I indicated earlier. So I'm adding some pieces of the fried meat, but we like it fried and not in the stew. It depends. Sometimes we like it that way, sometimes we don't. So I've just added some pieces of the fried meat here. I will stir it around, taste it to see if everything is going together. Okay. If at this stage you feel it needs a little more salt, you go ahead, but I feel it's okay for us. We're cutting back on salt. So as you can see, this is a very easy tomato stew that you've used chicken. But if you wanted to use goat meat, beef, pork, you could have done it. You could have fried fish and added, or for fish stew, you could have just seasoned the fish and then added it directly into the stew. So there you have tomato stew with chicken. Thank you.